Hello, Dabblers of the Internet, JP here with another battle report for Kings of War, this one for a tournament, the Victorian Clash of Kings 2022 launch event. In this video, I'll be showing you Game 1 from the 3 games from this tournament. So if you're interested in watching a tournament report, then watch on. As a quick forward to any watchers, we have a variety of things that come on this channel. We have my own content following mostly Kings of War and my hobby involved therein, but we also have my wife Flo and her content following her stitching journey. So as long as you don't mind this duality of content, please hit like and subscribe to our channel. So this was the Victorian Clash of Kings 2022 launch event. As it describes, this is the launch event for the Clash of Kings book that just came out from Mantic, which updated all of the Kings of War factions, and also added in 2 new factions. Now, I don't believe anyone brought to this tournament the 2 new factions since they were just out, and I don't think anyone quite has an army of Riftforged or Halflings up and running. But a lot of people were taking all kinds of the new things. It's almost impossible not to. Now, this event was held at the House of War, which is in Ringwood, Victoria. And if you're not familiar with the House of War, it's quite a good store. It's got a huge range of different game systems there. Unfortunately, it doesn't host Mantic products. It was a shame, but there's not actually many brick and mortar stores in Australia that contain Mantic products. There is one down in Geelong, which is a bit far from me, but I would like to visit it one day just for fun. Now, onto the actual event itself. It comprised of 3 rounds of 2,000 points. With 3 different scenarios, but they're straight out of the book, so nothing fancy here. And that's not surprising because we've been in lockdown ever since July until this point in December when this tournament was held. So keeping things simple, I think, was in the best interest of everyone, as well as the fact that we're all trying to get to grips with the new Clash of Kings kind of stuff. So 3 rounds of vanilla Kings of War sound perfectly fine to me. Now, what makes this event quite fun is the host, Michael Crossman. He makes sure that there's lots of kinds of prizes. There's door prizes, wherein people are rolling off to get different things. There's prizes for all kinds of just stuff that's nothing to do with the actual gaming of the event. And so this means that everyone turning up just has a whole lot of fun, because you never know, you might get something, and you know, it's terrain or it's Mantic kits. It's really quite fun, just being in this environment. Everyone feels like they're in it to win something, even if they're not a great gamer. And the next part that makes this really good is that Michael Crossman himself offers free army boxes from the Mantic range to anyone that's new to Kings of War. And if you might recall, I myself was one of these receivers back in January when I first started Kings of War. So this is just a great way to bring in new people, and I think the fact that these army boxes are such a low price makes it somewhat easier than, say, if it was Games Workshop kind of thing, but really just comes down to the generosity of Michael and making sure that new players really want to get into it. I mean, nothing makes you want to start an army than getting, you know, 4 regiments of your key unit to add to whatever you might already have or you might not have. So in that case, it's just a perfect way of getting people into the game and giving them a little bit of plastic crack to get on. So here's my Forces of the Abyss list that I took to this event. It's quite familiar already with what I took with Matt, because that was practice for this event and future events. So it won't be any surprise that it starts off with 2 regiments of Abyssal Guard, because I really like them. They are pretty chunky, and they have Regenerate and Defense 5, so it's just quite good. The Abyssal Ghouls are always in as well, because once I realised I needed this massive block of nerve, that these guys are the best on offer within the entire Forces of the Abyss list. You give them a healing brew just because I had the 5 points left over, and it just gives them just a little bit more staying power. You just think of it as 1 or 2 extra nerve on top. Just remember to use it, that's the key thing. And then I have a Gargoyles Troopers, some chaff, because they are the best chaff, just to get in the way when I need to. Still not completely sure how to use them to their best effect, but this mainly comes down to my inability to use chaff in general. It just requires some thinking. Next, we have a regiment of flame bearers, because I still just enjoy shooting, so always a regiment of flame bearers, at least one. This is not the dirty 3, but you know, it's still some shooting. And then we have a horde of tortured souls, which is really chonky kind of, not chaff. Some people use them as thick chaff in regiments, but when you take a horde of them, you know, it's like 18 attacks, it's kind of like Abyssal Horseman light, because they have Thunderous 1 and Crushing 1. So they have the same armor piercing as the Abyssal Horseman regiment, they just hit a little bit less well because of their melee 4+. But otherwise they're fantastic because they fly. But then, obviously, the Abyssal Horsemen are in as a regiment, and this time they are sporting the Brew of Sharpness, because, as Visibly Riley has always pointed out, that really putting in terrain mitigation is secondary to putting in things that just make them hit better, because the Brew of Sharpness then obviates the need to worry about that -1, you know, the hindrance from charging through difficult terrain. Obviously I'll still lose the Thunderous, but the Brew of Sharpness just means they hit a lot meaner in all cases, instead of just over terrain. So I'm really starting to like this option. Then I have the Cronius, who was the real winner from Clash of Kings, which I've already talked about, thanks to his improved melee stats and price points. But what I'm doing here for the first time really is sporting him with a Drain of Life. So this is Drain Life 8. And I know this is generally not quite popular as a spell, because yeah, why would you worry about a Drain Life on a guy you want to be in combat all the time? But the way I see it, the Drain Life is a spell you don't get to cast very often anyway, and so I wanted to put it in just to see how it would go in those situations where the Cronius has finished a combat, but then he's still got to spend a little while repositioning before we can get into the next combat, or there's that preceding moment before the charge or before taking a charge as the lines get close, that he can implement that Drain Life. Because I find there's times where since he doesn't have Nimble, he is still, you know, turning or he's repositioning, and in that moment he's usually 6 inches away from the enemy because he's in the thick of things, and so a Drain Life might be good. I've just got to learn when to use it, so I think that's alright. It is a bit costly at 30 points, this Drain Life, but by the same token, Drain Life is expensive on any character that you take it on, and I think the Cronius is more likely able to use it than, say, an Abyssal Warlock, because getting an Abyssal Warlock within 6 inches of the enemy, that's somewhat trickier, because you don't always want them that close. Of course, if they're right behind the lines, that's okay, it will happen, but I feel like the Cronius will always be in the thick of it and is more capable of getting value out of Drain Life. That's just my opinion anyway. And besides, the Abyssal Warlock has plenty that they can do otherwise. You know, they've got their own firebolts, and then in the case of Zazuzu, which I took, you know, he's got his own spells that you want to be using anyway. Then next I have the Abyssal Fiend as a source of inspiring, so that's my first source of inspiring, and the Abyssal Fiend got a bump in the fact that Fireball got better. It got Shattering, so the Abyssal Fiend just got better. So I'll be sporting this guy around the battlefield. Then I have the Manifestation of Baal, who really needs no more explanation of how good he is, because he's got such a long line of special rules that you better just look it up yourself. But among them is the fact that he has Lightning Bolt 7 in tandem with his own 7 attacks. So whether he's at range or he's in combat, he's always punching. And I think that's the best part. And he flies around, so he's always going to be able to get his shots off. So really, he just serves as just an annoyance at worst for your opponent, and a real danger at best. And finally, yes, Zazuzu the Betrayer. The named Abyssal Warlock that came with Helpy's Rift and is now officially included thanks to Clash of Kings. And he has his boosted Betrayal ability, whereby he can boost his somewhat meager Lightning Bolt 4 with up to 4 extra dice, but any of those hits will cause damage on an elected unit nearby, or your own unit. So usually this is the Abyssal Ghouls. I pick them as my battery to start off with, and when I've killed enough of the Abyssal Ghouls and I think I should lay off, then it goes into some of the other units that might be alive. And yeah, so this just means, you know, you get this Lightning Bolt 8, and you got Lightning Bolt 7, so there's 15 Lightning Bolt in one list, just off 2 characters. You don't need to spend a lot to get these guys in. So I think this is a great combination, and it's quite a shooty list overall. And that's obviously a theme. So I will introduce this list at the start of each of the different videos, just in case, you know, you're new. So you don't have to come back to this video, but this is probably going to be my most in-depth description of my own list. So my first opponent for this tournament was Rob and his Salamanders, and he starts off his list with 2 troops of Gokota warriors who are there as the simple chaff, and part of the things that they escort are this giant horde of Salamander ceremonial guard. His particular unit, the way he set it up, was a bunch of I think they're called a temple guard from the Lizardmen fantasy, because his whole army was actually just a whole bunch of Lizardmen with the exception of the Clan Lords and Fire Drakes. But the Salamander ceremonial guard with the temple guard with the Slan mage priest that was kind of sitting in the middle of them, so it's a really cool looking horde. So there's this big slab of horde. He also has a horde of tyrants, which are the large infantry unit, so the equivalent of the Croxigors, and they have the effigy of fire upgrade to make them reroll some points of damage. Then we have one of the major victors from Clash of Kings update, and that is the Scorchwings, who not only improved in terms of their combat output, but their shooting output as well. So these whole regiment of Scorchwings that are flying around to put some damage on. Then in the support pieces, he's taken a Phoenix, which is the capability to not only dish out fireballs, but also to heal. And so that will be sitting behind his lines. Then we have a Herald with a Loot of Insatiable Darkness to bring in that Bane chant to bump up some of these units, because although most of them have some form of crushing strength, you usually want to bump them up a little bit more. So I can see why he's brought this in, and it's a good source of inspiring. Then we have 2 Clan Lords on Fire Drakes, one of which with the Brew of Haste to make it move a bit faster, and one with the Pipes of Terror to bring that little bit of brutal. Both of these terrify me greatly, and the miniatures that he used were fantastic, so hopefully the pictures that I've taken across the game will demonstrate how cool these look. These were taken from, I think, the WizKids range of dragons, 2 different ones, and it's really cool. And as he put it, the fact was that in Warhammer Fantasy Lizardmen, it was a great shame that despite the fact that Lizardmen had all kinds of lizards, they did not actually have any form of dragon on which lizards were flying. So, you get to see elves on dragons, you get to see chaos warriors on dragons, you even get to see bloody empire humans on dragons, but you don't get to have a lizardman on dragons. So he's very excited about the fact that in Kings of War, the Salamanders, you can have a clan lord on a fire drake, and even though it's called a fire drake, we can just say it's a dragon. And fire drakes are quite terrifying with the sheer number of attacks that they bring. Even though it's only on melee 4+, there's a lot of attacks that come from a flying beast, so I rate these quite highly. Then we have real thing from Clash of Kings, and that is the formation from the Salamanders, so the Whispering Scales. Now the Whispering Scales requires you to bring Salamander Primes, 2 regiments of them, and a battle captain to lead them. And what you get for your money is that you get Scout and Stealthy on all of these units, so that they get to move forward right at the start of the game, and they've got Stealthy, so that, -1 to hit from ranged attacks. But then the battle captain himself gains a Pathfinder aura and an Elite aura. The Pathfinder aura is for heavy infantry overall, so it's actually quite good in terms of being able to give Pathfinder to other things like the Salamander Ceremonial Guard, whereas the Elite aura instead is only for Whispering Scales, so it's only going to affect those Salamander Primes. So expect to see this battle captain escorting those Salamander Primes nearly all the time. So that's his list, and this is the second time I've gone against Salamanders ever. The first time I went against Salamanders was heavily featuring the Fire Elementals and Rhinosaur Cavalry, so this is almost completely different. So I'll be interested to see how this works out. The first round of this tournament saw us playing Loot, which is a relatively simple scenario whereby you have 3 loot tokens placed along the center line, the first being predetermined, right in the center, and then we each get to place one along that center line with the normal restrictions, 12 inches from each other and 3 inches from blocking terrain or the terrain edge, and they ended up being placed as so. Now I'll go through the deployment and help you identify some of the different things here. Now firstly, I want to apologize for the first few pictures of this battle report, because I was, in this case, starting to use an actual Fuji film camera, because I've been using up until now always my phone camera for these kind of photo battle reports, but I was finding that it was running out of battery, and it's just not so reliable, especially when you want to start using, the actual timer feature. You want to actually have a chess timer. Then you can't also use it for pictures. So I've been starting to learn how to use my actual camera, but I'm no kind of photographer, so I have no real knowledge on the different nuances of the different features. I tried to look for it, but there is no feature that says here's the feature for taking pictures of a battle report. So some of these pictures will either be to begin with, blurry or oversaturated, but I eventually figured out how a particular setting, which was sport setting, which means I don't have to stand there too long for the camera to get completely in focus, because it has this autofocus, it's a digital camera, and also it's not so sensitive to movement, so I went for the sport setting in the end. So apologies for any of the blurry pictures that might be in the first view before I discovered the brilliantness of the sport setting. So in any case, and the brightness comes from the fact that this is the top floor of the House of War, and so you have big windows either side, which means the whole table's well illuminated, but the camera kind of didn't know what to do with so much brightness. There's just so much light. So sometimes the colors might be a bit saturated, so I apologize for that as well, but I think you'll be able to appreciate my opponent's models in either case. So, starting from the left from my opponent's army, we have the formation right here. So as predicted, it all went together. We have the Salamander Prime regiments right there with the battle captain right in between, sitting very snug. Then we have the big horde of ceremonial guard. You can see there the Slan, he's part of the ceremonial guard with the temple guard unit. And behind that there is another Slan model, and that represents the Phoenix. So although it doesn't look very tall, you've got to imagine it's like height 5 or 6, so sitting right there. Next to those, we then finally have the Tyrant Horde there, so you can see the Croxical models, and preceding them there are the Gakota warriors, so skinks. So that is this whole contingent over here. Then we have a bit more of a mobile flank that's coming down to obviously give me some pressure from the flank and the sides, which include the Scorch Wings, the now upgraded terrifying Scorch Wings. One Clan Lord on Fire Drake. I do not remember which one had the haste and which one had the Pipes of Terror, but I think they have cards on them to denote. But there's one Clan Lord, and you can see that model. It is so cool. The only problem is with this particular one is those wings swooping down either side are really annoying when it comes to aligning with units, so definitely suggested putting it up on a kind of plinth or cliff or something like that. Otherwise it looks amazing. It's just those wings are a little bit annoying. Then next to those we have another little unit, that troop of Gakota warriors, and the other Clan Lord on Fire Drake on another, this model much more suitable for Kings of War, because you can just see how elevated it is, and just both the paint jobs on all these models is fantastic, and I assume these are the most recently painted because they're even better. It's just awesome, and they terrified me because, 2 flying titans, and I didn't bring all my flame bearers, was quite terrifying. But anyway, let's go with my setup. So I have layering. I've learnt that layering is pretty good for my army, and so I have 2 units here. Those are the Abyssal Guard units. Always I tend to put them next to each other. I'm not sure why. I don't tend to split them up, but I've got the 2 regiments of Abyssal Guard, and behind them I have the Cronius and the Abyssal Fiend. So that's my leadership over there, my inspiring bubble all taken care of. Then over here I have the Zazuzu Battery, the Abyssal Ghouls, with the horde of tortured souls right next to them, and behind them these are the Flame Bearers, the regiment of Flame Bearers, accompanied by Zazuzu, so they kind of form a firing team here, so they'll be able to shoot out. Then also we have the Gargoyles behind them, and just so they can fly out, and the Sharpness Horses, so the Abyssal Horsemen with the Brew of Sharpness. What's missing in this picture? Oh, it's probably the manifestation of Baal, and that's because this first photo did not include the fact that he is over here. He's on the far flank, because he's so fast and nimble. He doesn't really need to be part of the main army, unless you really need him for his inspiring presence in any particular case. Salamanders won the first turn roll-off, so turn 1 goes to the Salamanders. So here's the first of the blurry action shots, but at least you can appreciate my manifestation of Baal's positioning. That's where he is, right there on the flank. So this is actually the preceding turn 1 movement, and this is the scout movement, moving right up, going towards that token. Now, with that scout movement done, the rest of the army then moves up. The Whispering Scales move up further, these guys coming flush with the obstacle, while the others moving into the forest, Pathfinder allowing them to do so without any problem whatsoever. The Phoenix is now positioned behind these Whispering Scales, I assume to help them out, while the Horde of Ceremonial Guard is moving up. And you can see, this is when I have only played Salamanders once on Tabletop Simulator, but what I do remember is their giant bases causing so much problem for movement, in terms of the fact that it's really hard to I guess figure out how much distance they need to move between them, and you need a lot of space. And so I guess the one problem here is the way that they've been deployed is everything's got very small gaps in between, and this just means that there's the ability to pivot in any given situation is vastly reduced. So you can see there's a bit of a traffic jam here, but not too bad. So yeah, the Ceremonial Guard have moved up. We've got behind them, I didn't talk about him before, but there's the Herald with the loot of Insatiable Darkness, and the Gakota Warriors have jumped on this loot token here with the Tyrants behind them. On this side, unsurprisingly, the two Clan Lords on Fire Drakes are swooping in on the flank, giving me quite a bit of consternation. So they've just moved both up right here, ready to have their pick of my army to pounce on. And the Scorchwings and the little Gakota Warriors in the background just rushing to catch up. This denotes the first of the ranged attacks coming my way, and that is from the Clan Lords' breath attacks. So they've got a huge amount of breath attack that they can bring to bear, and that's, yeah, managed to deal a bit of damage. And yeah, that's it. On to turn one for me. As the first turns, while taking a while in terms of moving the physical models, there's usually not that much going on, unless you're going against shooty goblins or something. So on my first turn, here is a blurry action shot, just showing the kind of the tension in the feeling of the game. There's not that much tension. But what I did open up with was a charge with my Tortured Souls right into that Clan Lord. It was within the 16 inches, so bang, I slammed right into it. Did not hold back. Because if I can fight them first, I certainly will. Now, to protect the rest of the army, that's where I brought in the Gargoyles. The Gargoyles flapped over to block the revenge that might come from this particular Clan Lord on Fire Drake. And then I bring to bear my shooting potential, aiming in the direction of that Clan Lord. Because if there's something you can do to big targets like that, is shoot them. Because even though they're defense 5, they're just so big, usually cover won't be a matter. And I'm on a hill, even better. So they've both moved up around on the hill. Moving forward are the Abyssal Ghouls, and then if we move over to the rest of the battlefield, we can see that everything else is kind of fanned out. So I've positioned my Abyssal Guard in such a way that now the gaps can get filled by the Abyssal Fiend and the Cronius, because with the way that this is positioned, you can't charge the Cronius by itself. I don't mind if they charge the Abyssal Fiend by itself. In fact, either of these I don't mind if they get charged by the Salamander Primes, because they've got quite high nerve. They're higher than the Abyssal Guard, and I don't expect them to break, so really I don't worry about these guys either. They're really tough numbers. And then sitting right here are the Abyssal Horsemen. Now, you might not have seen from this kind of zoomed out view, but one more thing happened, and I was quite proud of this, and this was a flank charge from the Manifestation of Baal. He was sitting right over here, and was in the in the flanking arc of the Phoenix, because it had turned just... Oh, there's my dog. Okay, I've let the dog in. Anyway, as I was saying, and I got a flank charge on the Phoenix, because I could see it. The way it had rotated just a bit to face inwards just meant that it opened up the flank charge. And so Manifestation of Baal, as he is wont to do, takes any kind of opening that he can get, especially with his nice small base. So a flank charge of the Manifestation right there. So we go to the shooting, and I managed to put on a couple of wounds to this guy here, which didn't really amount to much. But there we go, a nice blurry zoomed in shot of 4 damage. Not too shabby, but would have hoped for better. Then we go to this ultra shaky shot. I still haven't figured out this the sports setting, I'll get there soon, of my combat here. And what this little flag here denotes are the tokens that he uses for wavering. So I have managed to get a wavering on this Phoenix, which is fantastic, so that's a good start. I mean, I would have preferred to take it out entirely, but it's still only 14 attacks when I hit in the flank, because, you know, 7 double to 14, so it's, you know, it's not still a huge amount of attacks that would reliably take it out, but a wavering is definitely good, because it's not going to be able to do much more. In the combat over here, I've managed, with my Tortured Souls, who slammed right in, and they did 9 damage, which, if you consider they have 18 attacks, and they hit on 4s, that is phenomenal. So they rolled really hot and put 9 damage on this clan lord right here. And what they managed to do was actually waver them. So I haven't shown it here, but this token here will end up over there because he mistakenly placed it. So it'll end up on this one. So I've managed to waver this clan lord. Obviously this means I will be taking a flank charge from these guys, and so perhaps what I should have done is reposition, but I didn't want to give a rear here either, so I think a flank charge from Dakota Warriors is okay, but in hindsight I could have then taken this opportunity to reform to face my front here. So in summary, Manifestation of Baal managed to waver the Phoenix, the Tortured Souls managed to waver a Clan Lord and Fire Drake and give it an epic 9 amount of wounds, and we have another Clan Lord that's taken a couple of wounds. So I think that's a pretty good start for the Forces of the Abyss. So let's see how Rob turns it around in turn 2. So already we've got the Dakota Warriors that have repositioned onto the token, and we'll pick it up and just run away with it. That's the plan, and that's a smart plan. That's what you do. If you have a unit that's able to do so, you have it sit on objectives, steal objectives, whatever. Now you can see already that the token has been positioned correctly, so this guy is now wavered. And we can also see over here in the background, the Gargoyles have received a flank charge from the Tyrants, which is perfectly fine in my books. So looking better over here, we can see that flank charge on the Gargoyles, so au revoir Gargoyles, unless it's a double one, but I doubt it. And then over here with the Dakota Warriors have charged forth into the Ghouls, as a sacrifice, I suppose. The rest of the army hasn't really moved up all that much, but we have got the Ceremonial Guard that are now flush with the same obstacle as the Whispering Scales here. And to relieve some of the pressure on the Phoenix, the Battle Captain has turned around and decided to attack the Manifestation of Baal for such impudence as he would be attacking a Phoenix. How dare he! So the Battle Captain is coming in to give him what for with all 3 of his attacks. It's not all that much, but he's going to do it anyway. Now looking down here, why did I take a picture of this? Well, oh, it was just a re-show this kind of flank, and this flank that's happening right now. So as predicted, my Tortured Souls, who should have reformed to face the Dakota Warriors on their Scorch Wings, are going to take the penalty of the full flanking attack of these new buffed up dudes. And if you're wondering why there is no longer damage on my Tortured Souls, because they have Life Leech 2. I didn't lose the dice. But yes, the flank attack has been completed, but already there's this wing is impeding on these wings because they can't quite get aligned properly due to the epicness of this particular Fire Drake. Talking about the other Fire Drake, with his hand firmly indicating what he plans to do, we have this Fire Drake that's jumped from there onto the other side of this obstacle and turned to face down the side of my army. How terrifying. And he's just hoping that he can fire breathe on something unfortunate. That 5 damage there, I didn't talk about before, is the consequence of Zazuzu going real hot with his lightning bolts. So, sorry, Abyssal Ghouls, but, you know, that's what you're for. So now coming here, he's managed to get Bane Chant onto his Battle Captain from the Loot of Insatiable Darkness and the Herald. So that's what's indicating here. That's the ranged phase as far as it's concerned on this side of the battlefield. The Phoenix is not contributing because he is wavered. Now the only other range attacks that are on offer are from the Fire Drakes, and we can see that they didn't really do much at all because there is no damage on my guys. So yeah, that's just what happened, unfortunately, for the Fire Drake. Fortunately for me. In combat, the flank attack managed to put 5 damage on my Tortured Souls, which is something I think they can weather because they are dash 17. Then here against the Gargoyles, they get hit and they get removed, and the Tyrants then reform to face what I would now say, is the flank of my Abyssal Ghouls, which is terrifying, because I don't want to lose my Abyssal Ghouls all that quickly. I don't mind losing them in general, but not that quickly. The Kokoda Warriors put an epic 1 damage. You recall that it was 5 before because of Zazuzu, and the Kokoda Warriors added to that tally with 1, which is not really enough to get rid of them. You could waver them, but they still have Fury. And that Battle Captain managed to get 1 damage on my Manifestation of Baal. So, take that! Now to my retaliation for such impudence. I'm getting impudence twice. So what did I do in my turn 2 to meet these oncoming threats? Well, actually I didn't do all that much. You can see on the left flank here, all my units are just kind of arrayed a little bit more neatly, but I'm making sure that now I can start hitting off with some of my spells. So we've got Fireball from the Fiend, and we've got Drain Life from the Cronius, and so this is the situation where, you know, he's sitting there. I don't want to charge him because there's obstacles in the way. That's, you know, hindered charge, hindered charge. The Cronius can get over it, he's got Strider, but all the other guys would go right through all this terrain and just go in and hindered. And I don't have to if I don't want to, but he would be hindered if he charged me. Because, surprisingly, guess what? The Pathfinder does not include obstacles, so these 2 units, were they to charge across, would both be hindered. And so I'd rather leave that up to him rather than myself, so I'm using my ranged attacks to keep going there. I charge back in here to the Phoenix, and I do obviously countercharge here with the Abyssal Ghouls to take out the Kokoda Warriors, and down at the bottom I've got everything repositioned to face this Fire Drake. So the Zazuzu didn't really need a turn, he's still got line sight on that Fire Drake, but the Flame Bearers did need to reposition in order to shoot there. And the Abyssal Horsemen have turned about face to bring their sharpness gaze on that Fire Drake and force him to do something. It can't stay there, so hopefully that will make him move about in a bit more of an erratic way to get out of the way of these horsemen. And finally, I've got a countercharge back in with the Tortured Souls, back on the Fire Drake, because I believe that's the greater threat than the Kokoda Warriors. I could turn and countercharge the Kokoda Warriors, but I feel like that's just not good enough. So doing a charge here means also I still get my Thunderous, which is good. So looking at the damage from a shooting, it is a bit dismal now, just the 1 damage on top of the 4 that I already had. And then over here, what I believe I'm showing is a bit more shooting. What was I shooting? Oh! No! Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Zazuzu wasn't shooting at that Fire Drake, although he probably should have. I was instead shooting at the Scorch Wings, and so I did do quite a bit of damage on them, as you can tell by the 4 extra damage here on the Ghouls from the Betrayal ability. But I thought, yeah, maybe this is the time, because they're no longer in combat, because I have charged here, so I thought I could shoot them. But this is one of my problems, is I do like to try and conquer and divide, but when it comes to shooting, usually that's a bad idea. Usually you want to concentrate your shooting to bring down a target and then move on to the next one. And here is an example where I should have been lightning bolting instead the other guy, the Fire Drake that's coming in on my side. And so from this combat I managed to kill the Phoenix, and now have turned to face the Battle Captain and the rear of his entire line. So this is a perfect situation where I'm now ready to have my pick of his army. Over here in another blurry action shot, but this time I have figured out sports mode, and now the problem is the way it's focusing. Focus on those beautiful wings rather than my not so beautiful Tortured Souls beneath. But they did manage to put some damage through, as denoted by the damage they have healed, so they have life leech too, so they got their full damage back, and I managed to put some more hurt on the... In the final combat, we have the Abyssal Ghouls that managed to take out the Kokoda Warriors, no problem, because 25 attacks 5+ still means that you're going to hit with quite a lot. So they didn't last all that long, but I guess it was there to slow them down so they didn't just charge off into the Tyrants, I suppose. So on to turn 3 for the Salamanders. So first things first, if you've got a token, make sure you get it far enough away that it can never get taken back. And so that's what the mission of these Kokoda Warriors is to just slowly progress across here. Now actually, completely didn't explain what terrain was on the battlefield, and I really apologize. I'll have to go back and do that. But what we denoted this was as a forest, which is a bit annoying because of the different ruins in there. But since there was only one other forest on the battlefield, we thought this was the other forest. So it was a forest to us, and so it's moving across. So, as expected, the Clan Lord and Firedrake didn't really want to countenance trying to charge into those Sharpener's horses, because even on the countercharge, Sharpener's horses are quite terrifying. So instead, he flew the full 20 inches straight forward to get to grips with the rest of my army and get out of range of those horses. So the horsemen, in order to follow, would have to do a full reform on the spot in order to face. So I think this was quite a smart idea in terms of getting away. Over here we have a whole lot of positioning that was going through his head, so he was repositioning things quite a bit. He was trying to move these guys sideways. He didn't want to have to sit with this obstacle in front of him, but in the end he just gave up and thought, stuff it, I'm just going to charge. So everything kind of charged in, followed by the battle captain, who needed to be in range of this particular unit. Originally he had thought to keep on charging the manifestation, which would have been a good idea in terms of disordering him and preventing a flying attack, but also you need this elite aura and the Pathfinder aura to make sure that these guys don't get a hindered charge through here. So in the end he had to bring them down into this forest, the battle captain, so that the Whispering Scales regiments can have their full effectiveness brought to bear. So these guys are hindered, but he didn't care. They're charging into both of my Abyssal Guard regiments, and I think that these ones will be fine, but these ones perhaps not, because even a hindered, it's a lot of attacks coming from the Ceremonial Guard. And so what happened here was then the only thing that happened in the range phase in terms of Salamanders was a Bane Chant. So this little guy Bane Chanted the Ceremonial Guard. So starting with the combats, he went for the most exciting one, which was this involving a flank charge of the Scorchwings and the front charge of the Clan Lord and Firedrake, which unsurprisingly resulted in the the repeated demise of the Tortured Souls. They already died once, probably many times, and here's just one more time to add to the tally. Over here, I didn't show a picture of this charge happening, but oh, guess what? Tyrants killed Flamebearers, but that's okay. The Flamebearers did put out quite a lot of damage in that previous Clan Lord and Firedrake, so if they're just sitting there to hold up some tyrants, I think that's fine. Over here we can see that 9 damage was put down onto the Abyssal Guard by the Ceremonial Guard, and that was quite considerable, and it was enough to destroy them. So like I said, I didn't feel comfortable with how they were getting attacked, and I was right. It was just a little bit too much for a -16 unit to take, even when they're hindered. But I guess it's the Bane Chant that really got us through. Over here it was a completely different story. We only had 3 damage from that regiment. Even though they do have the elite, the hindered charge makes it a whole lot different because they're nearly 4+, which is not great. I think they only have 12 attacks, so they turn out to merely 5+. That's really not much at all. And when you're hitting a defense 5 unit with -16, 3 damage doesn't really quite do anything. But same unit, no hindered. It just goes to show what happens. You get double the damage output. So they put 6 damage on my Abyssal Fiend, which was a little bit shocking. Still not too concerned, because he does have quite high nerve. So now it's up to me in turn 3 to try and drag myself out of this mess. So most excitingly, you'll have noticed that we've got the Abyssal Horsemen have charged the Tyrants. They could see them on the hill, and what allowed them to do so was the fact that my Abyssal Ghouls and the Cronius have both together charged that Ceremonial Guard unit, clearing the path for the Abyssal Horsemen to charge right up the hill, right there. And so this is hopefully enough to take out the Tyrants, and then leave me completely free to face down both this Clan Lord and the Kokoda warriors on the Scorchwings, because I don't think they're quite powerful enough to take these guys out completely. But maybe. The idea of the sharpness is it really freaks out opponents, and that's why I like it so much. Then we have over here, you might be... Ooh, I didn't get my... Over here, there's my pen. You'll be able to see the fact that the Manifestation of Baal has come in for another flank charge. So from his position up here, where the ashes of the Phoenix would be, he could see the flank of this Fire Drake. Now, if he was disordered, say from an attack from the battle captain, the things might have been different. He wouldn't have been able to leap across the entire battlefield to charge into the side of this Drake. But in this case, he was completely free to do so, so it's his second flank charge of the game. Everything else just countercharge into what they were into. So now we have a whole fight on our hands. And here's a picture just showing, just in case I forgot, to mention the fact that Bale managed to do that. So everyone knows Bale's pretty nasty, and I think Rob unfortunately is figuring this out for the first time. So looking over here at the shooting, well, guess what? Zaz Uzu, using this time the Abyssal Horseman as a battery, thanks to the 4 damage they copped, managed to whip out a huge amount of lightning bolt on that Fire Drake and managed to destroy it with all that lightning. So pretty impressive stuff from Zazuzu, now clearing up one major piece on the battlefield. Bael, the other named character of my list, managed to do quite similar, carving up his own clan lord on Fire Drake using his own sword instead of lightning bolts, and is repositioned to face the rest of the army, seeing what he's left to deal with. Over here I managed to put out a modest amount of damage on both of the Whispering Scale units. They're quite robust in their own way, and while the Abyssal Fiend is quite strong, he's only got the 7 attacks, and the Abyssal Guard aren't really meant for taking things out, rather than just holding them up. Over here we have the Cronius getting into combat for the first time, and doing a reasonable number of damage, which we cannot see because of the yellow dice and the high glare. So unfortunately I will never know how much damage this was according to these pictures, but let's just know it was considerable. What was considerable was the amount of damage that Sharpness horses can put out. It's no surprise that when you put Sharpness onto a decent cavalry unit, it turns them into a real killing machine that can be directed in any number of ways, and so in this particular case it was enough to take out the Tyrants. And they reposition, unsurprisingly, to meet the charge of the Scorchwings, should they dare. I don't think they will, because they'll be needed at different tokens. So now to turn 4 for the Salamanders. These Kokoda warriors continue their journey, taking the loot off to Mordor. Over here we have a double charge now, so you can't quite see him, but behind the head of my Abyssal Fiend / Shaggoth, the battle captain has come in to give his 2 cents along with the regiment of primes. This is a countercharge right here, whereas over here the countercharge has been directed towards my Abyssal Ghouls because they indeed have taken a lot of damage already, and it's probably something that's quite reasonable to take out. And it was quite a bit of damage. You can see the little cards snuck in there, so the Bane Chant was imbued once more on these warriors, Ceremonial Guard, and they managed to bump up the damage. I believe it looks like a 17, so they already copped quite a bit of damage thanks to Zazuzu's deft hand, but 17 damage is a lot, and when you have 21-23 nerve, is not something you can easily ignore at all. Now, what was not mentioned before were the fact that, yes, these Scorchwings did not decide to attack my Abyssal Horsemen, but instead have jumped over onto this side in order to make a play for that loot token. And over here we have a bit more damage. No more damage put onto the Abyssal Fiend, I believe, but a bit more damage put onto my Abyssal Guard. Oh no, there was more damage. It just was in the next photo. So 3 more damage put onto the Abyssal Fiend. Now my turn to hit back. And how I hit back? Well, Manifestation of Baal needs not only to get to tokens, but also needs to take out more things, because his sword has not had quite enough flesh and blood yet. So it has charged off over to the Scorchwings over here, because thankfully he can see them. You know, he's height 4, so he can see over all this stuff, so bang, right across again. Now over here, I've decided that these Salamander Primes aren't going to get killed by themselves because these Abyssal Guard are really quite dismal on their own. So I've brought in the Cronius to bring in his deft hand. So he's got the D6 plus 6 attacks at melee 3+, so crushing 3, he can definitely bring in some pain. Whereas the countercharge that I chose over here was not against the Primes, but instead the Fiend has decided to pick on that Battle Captain to remove that source of Pathfinder and Elite aura. The Abyssal Horsemen now do not have all that much to do, so they've just repositioned. So in case these ghoulies fail, which they probably will, he can come in and clean up those ceremonial guard that still exist. So what's that wavering token for? I think, yes, so the wavering token actually was wavered, but he has Fury, so he can still countercharge anything he likes. But he does manage, with that countercharge, to remove the battle captain. So no longer is there inspiring here, so that's one thing, but also all those auras that he brings with him are also gone. Over here, I've Bane chanted my Abyssal Ghouls because that's what Zazuzu's other spell is. Guess what? It's not one that you commonly see used when you've got this awesome lightning bolt, but as we get into the battle when there's less things to shoot, sometimes a Bane chant is the more sensible option. So this Bane chanted unit managed to waver, as denoted by this white flag, this whole ceremonial guard horde. So the Abyssal Ghouls are definitely doing a good job this game. Where did that extra Bane chant damage spell come from? Well, you can see that these guys have taken one more damage, so I'm just putting it onto the Abyssal Horsemen because I'm like, they got regen, they're fine. Maybe I shouldn't do that so often. And then over here, the final combat I decided to deal with. And you can notice that the order of the combats was due to the fact I wanted to get rid of this Inspiring first. So once the Inspiring was gone, the Salamander Prime unit couldn't really hold up very well to the huge amounts of damage that this Cronius can bring now. The Cronius is fantastic. Always bring them. And then over here I've managed to waver the Scorchwings. Not quite what I wanted, but it's a start. So I have to kill them before I can then get onto this token and take it. Because guess what? I don't really have any tokens yet. Turn 5 for the Salamanders. How can they bring it back? Well, what they are bringing back is the loot token to their homeland. So these guys will continue, and I believe, spoiler alert, they'll get right to this edge of the game and this edge of the board, and I will not be able to stop them because I don't have anything flying enough to get over here, apart from the manifestation of Baal, and he's kind of preoccupied. Over here we have now a charge, because they're not counter-charging anymore, so we have the charge of the Salamander Primes into my Abyssal Fiend, which manages to destroy him, because he's taken too much damage, which is unfortunate, but it's fine. I don't really need the Inspiring over there anymore anyway. And they reposition to face my Abyssal Guard. In such a way, so that was one repositioning, but he did it in a bit further so that he would no longer be in the line of sight of my own Abyssal Guard, so they can't just charge right on in, which is pretty smart. So yeah, turn 5. It was quick. These guys didn't get to attack before because they were wavered, and so them sitting there, sucking their thumbs, meant that I get to charge them not only with the Abyssal Ghouls, so a counter charge there, but charge them with those repositioned Abyssal Horsemen with their Brew of Sharpness. And you can see that regeneration is paying off, so using Zazuzu on these regenerating units isn't too shabby. Over here, the Abyssal Guard have repositioned themselves to face the Salamander Primes to bring in a bit of pain if need be, but also just to cover the Cronius, which is now going on a pleasant wandering journey to that final loot counter that is laying over there. And the countercharge just here with a manifestation of Baal. And so a lot of things happen. Unsurprisingly, when you get charged by these Abyssal Horsemen, it's going to hurt quite a bit, and they did so. They managed to push right through this unit. The Bane chant on top of the ghouls was probably not needed, and so the ceremonial guard just evaporated under the hooves of these horsemen. So too did the Scorchwings under now the greater tally of the manifestation of Baal. He's managed to collect a lot of different heads, and so he's added a whole bunch of Scorchwings to his tally. And that's about it in terms of the movements. I've managed to also shoot at this little herald with... No, I didn't shoot at him. I'm not sure why he's got some damage on him. I believe that's damage, but in any case, I don't know how I did it. Now turn 6 for the Salamanders. So all that's left to do is to charge in here and hopefully take them out so that they can then move up here if it was a turn 7 to contest at least, or to charge the Cronius, who's going to head over there. And we've also got you won't be able to see them, but off screen we have those Gakota warriors. The Herald charged in over here. I'm not quite sure why. I probably would have thought that charging Manifestation of Baal maybe, but the Herald, unfortunately, like all these kind of standard bearer kind of guys, only has one attack, so what he will achieve is not all that much. But it probably could get rid of the ghouls, actually. That's probably why, because they're at such high damage already. But it didn't. So on to my turn 6. Now we have all kinds of things happening. Manifestation of Baal moves away from the token to leave to the Abyssal Horseman to pick up. The Cronius goes to the other token, and I countercharge here and here. What this achieves is the removal of those last 2 units, so I now have complete dominance of this kind of the board, and I feel a little bit bad, but I did need to do so in order to get that full attrition points, because we're playing blackjack. You can probably see this page over here is showing the way the scoring works, and so attrition is taken into account, so I wanted to get as high as I could. Probably not a good idea on the first match, because then it put me up against some pretty tough numbers in game 2. But in any case, this is what's been drilled into me after watching all these battle reports, is that you gotta get the kills when it matters. And in this case, the kills did matter. So the only thing that survived were those Gakota warriors off in the corner. And so I believe this might not, no, it's not quite the... And there's the final shot. The Gakota warriors off in the corner with their loot token, making sure that they bring some honor to the Salamanders, and I think they did rather well. There were probably a few opportunities earlier where Rob could have taken those tokens. He was walking across them and probably should have grabbed them. I understand you don't want to grab them too early, because in case that unit's going to die, you'll pass it on. But at some point there were probably moments where it could have been grabbed and just taken away. For instance, the Scorchwings are definitely capable of just grabbing things and running. But, you know, the fact is that their Scorchwings are now so much better in combat, it's almost a shame to just use them for that purpose. But ultimately, in the end, it's about the scenario. And my whole game plan was just to push past all those Salamanders to get to those loot tokens that were just left there. Because I knew I couldn't chase down these Gakota warriors without sending Baal after them, and that just seemed a bit silly. But even saying that, I probably should have, because, you know, ultimately it is the scenario, and Baal could have caught them quite easily. You know, he can move that full 20 inches for an at the double movement with 1 pivot. So he could have done that to get, you know, into that forest, and then he could have charged them and probably easily taken them out and take the loot token off them. But I did not do that, and I probably should have. But otherwise, yeah, I'm quite pleased with how my army worked in this game, and dealing with those 2 big range threats. So those Clan Lords and Fire Drakes can really mess things up. But I think keeping my horsemen in that back line helped me, I guess, put the pressure right back on them. Because then I was saying, well, hey, you are in my back line, but guess what? I've got this horseman regiment full of, you know, hitting on 2s ready to meet you. So do you want some of that? And obviously the answer was, no, I don't want some of that, I would like to move away, thank you, and they just flew right over, which meant that they were out of position in all other different kinds of ways, such as, yes, the aforementioned Baal. So Baal is just a fantastic unit, and I think he just suits my playstyle in terms of having this flexible unit that can go all over the place, so he will be in future lists, and obviously he's in the future games of this series, because, yes, this is the first round, so I've got my second round, which I will record quite soon. So if you like this battle report and like this style even, please give this video a like, leave a comment of anything that went wrong and looked bad or was a mistake. It's a bit hard to pick up on mistakes in these kinds of slideshow battle reports because you don't get to see the full picture, so yeah. Whereas I've found it's very helpful that people have pointed out some of the mistakes in my live action versions, because I can directly learn from it. I can go, oh yeah, you're right, that was something I should have done or didn't do or forgot. So it's definitely always helpful, because it helps me learn my army better in ways that, you know, we don't pick up on perhaps when we're playing live. So yeah, definitely put in any kind of comments or otherwise suggestions for army builds that you've done if you do Forces of the Abyss. Otherwise, I'll see you for round 2 in the next video. Bye!